He didn't leave all at once. He stepped away slowly, telling himself it didn't count. Michael Carter was alone in the kitchen when he noticed the clock had stopped. Not broken, just still. The second hand rested between two numbers, undecided. He stood there longer than necessary, coffee cooling in his mug, listening to the house breathe, the low hum of the refrigerator, the tick that never came. It was early. Ohio mornings had a way of holding their breath before the sun committed. Grey light leaned through the window, touching the table where his family used to sit together, not dramatically, just enough to remind him it was there. Michael didn't think, something is wrong. He thought, I should replace the batteries. That was how he handled most things. If something stopped moving, there had to be a simple fix. He set the mug down. The coffee tasted thin today, or maybe it always had. On the counter lay his work phone, screen dark, no messages yet. That small pause before the day demanded him again. He felt it in his chest, an urge to reach for it, to wake it up, to make sure he was still needed somewhere. Instead, he didn't. He stood there, one hand resting on the back of a chair that hadn't been pulled out in weeks. His wife preferred eating later now. The kids, grown mostly, had their own schedules, their own silence. Michael told himself this was normal. Men his age lived like this. Quiet houses, early mornings, work that filled the gaps. Still, the stopped clock bothered him more than it should have. He pressed his thumb against the glass, nudging the second hand forward. It resisted, then slipped back to where it was. Time, it seemed, was not interested in being pushed. Michael exhaled slowly, a sound halfway between a sigh and something unfinished. Somewhere deep, so deep he almost missed it, there was a sense that something had been asking for his attention for a long time. Not loudly, not urgently, just patiently. And patience, he was learning, could feel a lot like silence. If this silence feels familiar, subscribe. These stories are for men who don't need noise, just something true to stay with them. Michael Carter used to believe his life made sense because it was full calendars, full inbox, full weeks that left him too tired to wonder what any of it meant. At 52, his body carried the quiet evidence of years spent leaning forward, over desks, steering wheels, contracts he signed without rereading. His shoulders stayed tight even when he slept. His jaw ached in the mornings, as if he'd been holding something back all night. Work had become the language he spoke best, not because he loved it, but because it asked clear things of him. Show up, decide, fix, provide. At work, effort still translated into outcome. If something failed, you traced the problem, adjusted, moved on. There was a clean honesty to it, no guessing, no waiting. Home was different. Home required noticing things before they broke. Michael hadn't been good at that. He told himself the same story for years, that what he was doing mattered, that sacrifice was part of being a man, that one day his family would understand how heavy the load had been. Sometimes, late at night, he imagined explaining it all, the pressure, the responsibility, the way the world didn't pause just because your daughter had a school play or your wife sounded tired on the phone. He imagined nods, gratitude, relief. But those conversations never happened. Instead, there were smaller moments he didn't give enough weight to at the time. His wife starting conversations and letting them trail off when he answered with half sentences. The kids stopping their stories midway, as if sensing he wasn't really there. Dinners eaten faster, laughter that didn't quite include him. Michael noticed these things only in retrospect. At the time, he was busy being reasonable, busy doing what needed to be done. If someone had asked him then whether he was present in his family's life, he would have said yes without hesitation. He was there in the ways that counted: roof overhead, bills paid, plans secured. That was what he believed presence meant. Now, standing alone in the quiet house, that belief felt thinner than it used to. Not wrong exactly, just incomplete. There was a space inside him where certainty used to sit. In its place was something heavier, not regret, not yet. Something closer to the feeling you get when you realize a familiar road has slowly changed direction and you don't remember choosing the turn. The first real distance didn't announce itself. It arrived disguised as convenience. Michael started staying later at work because it made the evenings smoother, fewer questions, less tension. By the time he got home, decisions had already been made. Dinner eaten, lights dimmed, everyone seemed settled. He told himself this was good, efficient, but there were small things he began to miss without realizing they were becoming permanent. A jacket left on the back of a chair instead of handed to him. Conversations that continued without pausing when he entered the room. His name spoken less often, replaced by, "He's probably working." Once, he came home early, unexpected. He stood in the hallway and listened. His wife was in the kitchen with their son. Voices low, not secretive, just careful. When Michael stepped in, the conversation ended. Not abruptly, just gently, like something being set aside. He smiled, asked how their day was. They answered, kindly. But something had shifted. Later that night, lying in bed, Michael stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly above him. He tried to replay the moment, to identify exactly what he'd done wrong. Nothing obvious came to mind. That was the problem. Distance, he was learning, didn't come from one bad decision. It came from 100 reasonable ones, stacked quietly on top of each other. Each time he chose work, he felt justified, responsible, even proud. Each time he chose work, something else chose to grow without him. There were nights when his wife reached for his hand and found him already asleep. Mornings when she didn't bother waking him. It wasn't punishment, it was adaptation. Michael respected adaptation. He'd built his career on it. He just hadn't considered what it might look like at home. The house adjusted around him, and in doing so, it made less space for him. One evening, weeks later, he realized he couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked him to stay. One evening, Michael sat in his car after pulling into the driveway. The engine was still running. The porch light was on. Inside, he could see movement. Someone crossing the living room, a shadow passing the window. He didn't get out. He told himself he just needed a minute, to finish a thought, to let the day settle before stepping inside. He checked his phone. Nothing urgent. Still, he stayed. From the car, the house looked orderly, calm, like it didn't require him. That was the version of responsibility he'd learned to trust, the kind that waited until things were clear, until he felt useful. After a while, the porch light turned off. Michael shut off the engine then. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise had been. He sat there, hands on the steering wheel, unsure what he'd been waiting for. He went inside late. No one asked where he'd been. That night, lying in bed, he realized how easy it had become to arrive after decisions were made. How often he let timing choose for him. How often he told himself it was better not to disrupt what seemed to be working. Responsibility had given him cover, not from love, but from discomfort. At work, he was decisive. At home, he waited for permission that never came. He began to understand something he hadn't wanted to name before. It wasn't that he didn't care enough. It was that caring had started to feel inconvenient, and once something feels inconvenient long enough, you learn how to live without it noticing you're gone. Michael turned onto his side, staring into the dark. He thought about getting up, about saying something, anything. He didn't. Sleep came eventually. It always did, and with it, another reasonable choice quietly added to the pile. The call came on a Tuesday. Not urgent, not dramatic, just his wife's voice, careful in a way that immediately told him this wasn't about logistics. "Michael," she said, then paused, as if she was deciding whether to continue. He stood in the parking lot outside his office, keys in his hand, engine still off. The wind moved dry leaves along the curb. Ohio autumn, everything preparing to let go. I think we've gotten used to living without you," she said. Not angry, not accusing, just honest. Michael didn't respond right away. He waited for the rest of the sentence, for a solution, a request, a clear next step. None came. That was when it landed, not like a blow, like gravity. He realized she wasn't asking him to change. She was telling him what had already happened. That evening, he came home earlier than usual. The house felt different when he entered with intention, smaller, more distant. His wife was at the table, sorting papers. She looked up, surprised, not displeased, just unprepared. They sat across from each other. The space between them felt earned. She told him about the routines they'd built, the way the kids called less because they assumed he was busy, how decisions were made without consulting him, not out of spite, but necessity. "You were always tired," she said quietly, "so we stopped bringing things to you." Michael nodded. There was nothing to argue with. He thought of the clock in the kitchen, the second hand frozen between moments. This was the cost, not loss in a dramatic sense, but erosion. He hadn't been pushed out. He had slowly stepped aside. And now, standing there, he understood something that came too late to be useful and too early to be ignored. Provision had kept the house standing, but presence had been what made it a home. He sat there long after the conversation ended, listening to the familiar silence. This time, it didn't feel patient. It felt full. Guilt didn't arrive all at once. It settled. In the days that followed, Michael noticed it in ordinary moments, folding laundry that wasn't his, hearing the dishwasher hum and realizing someone else always started it, standing in the doorway of rooms he once moved through without thinking. Nothing accused him. That was the hardest part. No shouting, no slammed doors, no dramatic ultimatums, just the quiet knowledge that life had learned how to continue without his involvement. At night, sleep came late, not because his mind raced, but because it moved slowly, circling the same memories, stopping where it never had before. He remembered his daughter's face at the window years ago, waiting as he pulled out of the driveway. He had waved without slowing down. He remembered telling himself he'd make it up to her later. Later had felt infinite then. Now it felt closed. Michael sat alone in the garage one evening, lights off, door open just enough to let the cold in. The smell of oil and old wood grounded him. This was a place that still made sense. Tools hung where he left them. If something broke, he could see it. Inside the house, the damage had been quieter. He realized guilt wasn't punishing him. It was clarifying him, stripping away the story he'd told himself and leaving only what was true, that he had chosen distance, not out of cruelty, but out of comfort. It hurt to admit that, not because it made him a villain, but because it made him ordinary, a man who had mistaken being needed for being known. He sat there a long time, hands resting uselessly in his lap, feeling the full weight of years that could no longer be rearranged. Guilt, he learned, wasn't loud. It was steady, and it asked one question over and over. What are you going to do with what you see now? Michael did not try to repair the past. He had already learned how that failed. What he tried instead was staying, without knowing what staying was supposed to look like. Some evenings, he stood in the doorway of the kitchen longer than necessary. His wife moved around him, careful not to bump into his uncertainty. He wanted to help, to say something that sounded right. Most of the time, he said nothing. Once on early in the morning, he sat alone at the table and bowed his head out of habit. The words didn't come. He stayed there anyway, hands folded, not praying so much as waiting. After a while, he lifted his head, unsure whether anything had happened at all. The clock on the wall still hadn't been fixed. He noticed it again, the way it refused to move forward. He considered replacing the batteries, then didn't. It felt dishonest somehow, like pretending time could be restarted once you were ready. Michael began calling his children without explaining why. Sometimes they didn't answer, sometimes the conversations ended quickly. He let them. Presence, he was learning, was mostly about endurance, not being useful, not being forgiven, just not leaving. Some nights, lying beside his wife, he wondered if this new closeness was temporary, another phase that would pass once effort grew tiring. The thought scared him more than guilt ever had. He didn't feel changed. He felt exposed. And in that exposure, something quiet took shape. Not hope exactly, not peace, but a willingness to remain where he was, even if nothing more came of it. Michael turned off the light and lay there in the dark, listening to the house settle around him. Time did not start again, but he stayed awake long enough to notice where he was. Maybe this story didn't remind you of someone else. Maybe it felt closer than that. Not loud, not dramatic, just familiar. If you're carrying something you've never quite named, if you've been present everywhere except where it mattered most, you're not the only one learning this late. There's another story waiting for you, not to teach, not to correct, but to sit with you in the same silence. It begins where this one leaves off. Watch the next video. And if these stories speak the language you've been living in, subscribe so you don't have to find them alone.